Good morning. We're going to start the King's Report here in just a few seconds. I want to go ahead and start the live stream just a few seconds early so that the people can have a chance to find it and tune in. I already see 5 people already coming in. That's great. 7 now. Great. People are looking for it. That's wonderful. I've also posted it on Facebook on the Newfoundland, or the Sanctuary Church in Newfoundland, PA Facebook site. If you know of people who are still searching for the King's Report, can't find the King's Report, can't find the Sunday service, please guide them to the Facebook page, and then they'll be able to click on the link there and to find it very easily. Good morning, Mohammed. Thank you for joining. All right, it's 5 o'clock, so let's begin the King's Report for Monday. And this is Monday, June 4th, 2018, the 9th year of Changi, the 4th month and the 21st day. We're getting towards the end of the 4th month, and that means that True All Things is coming up very soon now. We're right now in the midst of making preparations for that. All right, go right to the weather in the Chunnigung area. And there's a little bit of rain is going to be continuing. The rain probability is going to remain during the day, but it'll be mostly cloudy for the most part. 50 degrees now, and getting up to 70 degrees during the day. So it's going to be a rather cool. But actually 70 is right about where we should be at this time of year. But in comparison to where we've been, it's going to be rather cool. All right, let's look at our Rima for this morning, if I can bring it up. We're in John chapter 12 this morning. And this is the scene where Jesus is predicting, or telling his disciples, telling his disciples that he is going to be crucified. And an interesting passage in John chapter 12, beginning at verse 20. And there were certain Greeks among them that came up to worship at the feast. The same came therefore to Philip, which was of Bethsaida of Galilee, and desired him, saying, Sir, we would see Jesus. Philip cometh and telleth Andrew, and again Andrew and Philip tell Jesus. And Jesus answered them, saying, The hour is come that the Son of Man should be glorified. Verily, verily, I say unto you, except a corn of wheat fall into the ground and die, it abideth alone. But if it die, it bringeth forth much fruit. He that loveth his life shall lose it, and he that hateth his life in this world shall keep it unto life eternal. If any man serve me, let him follow me, and where I am, there shall also my servant be. If any man serve me, him will my Father honor. Now is my soul troubled, and what shall I say? Father, save me from this hour, but for this cause I came unto this hour. For this cause I came unto this hour. Father, glorify thy name. Then came there a voice from heaven, saying, I have both glorified it, and will glorify it again. The people therefore that stood by and heard it said that it thundered. Others said, an angel spake to him. Jesus answered and said, This voice came not because of me, but for your sakes. Now is the judgment of this world. Now shall the prince of this world be cast out. And if I be lifted up from the earth, will draw all men unto me. This he said, signifying what death he should die. So a rather long Rima this morning, 14 verses in John chapter 12, going from verse 20 to verse 33. And it's interesting to me that this whole sort of mini sermon that Jesus gives, the message that he gives is first sort of caused by or sort of the when it comes about is that um, some Greeks, in other words, some non-Jewish people, come and ask to speak to Jesus, but they don't go to Jesus directly. In other words, they respect him. The Greeks respect him, and they say, "We would like to speak with Jesus," and they do that in a humble way, in a humble way. So they, I don't know if they understand really who Jesus is, perhaps not, but they have great respect for him as a teacher, uh, as a rabbi, perhaps. And when they show this respect to him, and when the disciples go to him and say, we have this Greek people who want to come and speak to you, what shall we do? Then Jesus goes on this message about about his coming death. Um, so Jesus, perhaps this is motivated by the fact that non-Jews are showing more respect for Jesus than the Jewish people, and Jesus realizes, or he is pointing out to his disciples, perhaps that not that he realizes, but he is pointing out to his disciples that he needs to die so that this message can be spread by the disciples, by the apostles throughout the world. Uh, Instead of saying to Andrew and Phil go to him and say, do you want to meet these Greek people? And Jesus says, the hour has come that the Son of Man should be glorified. In other words, the hour has come that the Son of Man, in other words, that Jesus needs to be placed on the cross. And he was placed on the cross because the people of his time did not recognize him. So he is offering himself now as an innocent sacrifice. Traditionally, Christians have pointed to this passage, among others, saying that this is proof that Jesus' original purpose was to die. Of course, Father, through the principle, teaches us something quite different, in saying that no, Jesus' original purpose, his main purpose, was to come and find a bride. That was the first thing that he wanted to do, to find a bride and to establish God's lineage on earth with that bride. In other words, to find a woman who was from a fallen lineage, and then with her as the in position of the restored Adam, restore her to the position of the restored Eve, and then together create a God's lineage on the earth. If there were a woman who was already in God's lineage, then there would be no way for us to receive salvation, would there? How could we be saved from Satan's lineage, and how could we enter into God's lineage? It's only because the Messiah comes and restores a woman from the fallen lineage to God's lineage that the way is opened up for the rest of us also to be restored to that lineage. So this idea that the Family Federation is apparently teaching that God creates God sends a Messiah to the earth, but he also sends a woman to the earth who is also in God's lineage and who is born without original sin. That idea would actually destroy God's salvation providence. There would be no way for God to save the rest of humanity, and the rest of humanity would be in Satan's lineage forever, even in the spirit world. So what is God going to do with all these people? Is he just going to make them not exist anymore? But God has chosen a way, though, to restore all of humanity, all of humanity, and then to bring all of humanity back to His bosom. And that is what now Jesus wanted to do, wanted to accomplish during His life by finding a bride, and then with that bride to restore the bride, and then with her to create God's lineage, so that all of humanity could be stored, could be grafted onto that lineage and restored to God. All right, let's go to the Cheonseongyung. We're in the book on the way of the completed testament, a perspective. So this also relates to the words that we just read from John chapter 12. This is on page 1465 in the electronic edition that I have here. And by the way, sometimes we can find the English Cheonseongyung on sale on eBay or on Amazon. And once in a while, we can find a copy. Recently, I found a copy, and so I posted the link on Facebook, saying that here people are looking for English Cheonseongyungs. Here's one. And a few days later, I noticed that the Cheonseongyung had disappeared from eBay. So I hope that someone bought it. I trust that someone bought it. And that's the reason it disappeared. It was available for $99. And as the Family Federation de-emphasizes True Father's words, even obliterates Father's words, they are taking down Father's videos from the internet as fast as they can, and wherever they can. And so I think that in the future we will find Cheonseongyungs available on eBay and Amazon, put there by Family Federation people who no longer value Father's words, no longer value Father's 8th grade textbooks and teaching materials. So keep an eye out. Just browse through eBay once in a while, do a search on eBay once in a while, or I guess maybe eBay has a way of where you can sort of establish a search criteria so that they will notify you when a Cheonseongyung becomes available. So then I think that's the best way to both save Father's words, because we don't want these books to go into the trash. We place great value on them. It's like the Bible being thrown away, or the flag. The flag of our country. If someone takes the flag of our country and throws it into the trash, that's a huge that's a serious thing. It's very disrespectful, isn't it? So also, if someone were to take the Bible and throw it into the trash, that would be a very, very disrespectful thing. So we want to save Father's words. We want to save the Cheonseongyung, because this is a holy book, especially if it happens to have Father's signature in it. And I don't know if this copy that was just sold on eBay had Father's signature in it or not, because I did not buy it. But especially if there is a copy of the Cheonseongyung that has Father's signature in it, we definitely want to save that, because that is a holy book. It's a holy book, and as we experience in the Rimas, this is not just black ink on paper. There is a certain magical aspect to this, a spiritual aspect to this, where we are able to open it at random, and or open it to a place where God guides us, where Father guides us, and then we are able to receive a spiritual message through that. Oftentimes, we can make decisions in our life using the Rima, and the king, the second king, has guided us in this way. He said, especially he says, if you receive a dream, and he mentioned this to Elizabeth Vargas as well. Also indirectly, she asked him how he communicates with the Father, and he said that through visions and dreams and through prayer. And he said that with all these messages, he says, have to be verified in Scripture. So if we have a dream about something, then it's important for us to open the Cheonseongeum, open the Bible, and and we can be guided to a place in the Bible or in a Scripture that will help us to verify what we've just been dreaming about, or what we've just been inspired to think, what the thoughts that come into our mind. And we can sometimes we can rely on this to make a very important decisions in our life. I seem to have some kind of a groggy throat this morning. I don't think I have any cold or anything like that, but I just as I began to speak this morning, I noticed that my voice is perhaps not a little bit unusual, so please forgive that. Anyway, let's read from the Cheonseongeum this morning on page 1465. Why were we born? Why should we live? And where should we go? You should not think that you were the cause of your birth. People are born into this world, yet do not know the origin and purpose of their birth. They are ignorant of the motivation and purpose of their existence. Neither our birth, nor our life, nor our death stems from our own intentions. Then what do we have to be proud about? We have no control over our birth. We are merely custodians in this life, and we cannot avoid the path of death. Thus, any attempt at self-praise and holding self-indulgent pride is pitiful. Once born, we are destined to live and destined to die and pass away to the next world. Father speaking in 1959, September 6th. This is from volume 7 of Father, page 178 of Father's collected sermons. The collected sermons as well. Fortunately, we have copies of the collected sermons, and today actually I will be sure to place those online so that people can refer to them. 615 volumes. Unfortunately, some of the later volumes were not redacted but edited to suit the desires of the Han Mother. Even before Father passed in his September 2012, as early as April of that year, Han Mother went to the Solhasa, there's the publishing company in Korea, that was in the church's publishing company, and instructed that certain passages be removed from the sermons. But that was true with the late among the 615 volumes, true of the latest ones. So especially the early ones we can trust. But think of it though. Think of how much of Jesus' words we have here. We actually have very little of Jesus' actual words, and those words were actually written down many years after his passing. So compared to that, we are very blessed. It would be great if we had more of Father's words, or with Father's words that we could truly trust our lives on. We don't know. At this point yet. We don't know exactly which volumes were corrected, or what parts were corrected or not corrected, but changed. So not corrected. That's the wrong word, but changed. But I'm sure that the day will come when we'll find out. Perhaps the people who did that will confess at some point. I hope they do. And I pray that they do, so that we can understand more about what happened to Father's words. But in this passage, we have Father emphasizing the fact that we are not in charge of our own lives. We didn't come into this world. We were not born into this world because we wanted to be. And some people have a problem with that, especially second generation. I think have a problem saying, "Well, I didn't choose to be born into the Unification Church. I didn't choose to be born into this life. Oh, I want to make my own choices. I want to live my own life." But we were born into a certain circumstance, and we there is a sense in which we need to be humble uh, before the uh, before the circumstances in which we were born. Some people are born into a rich family. Some people are born into a poor family. Some people are born into a poor country. Others born into a rich country. And there's nothing that we can really do about that. We cannot say I don't like this. I'm going to go back into my mother's womb and see if I can't be born into a better country. I don't like the mother or father that I have. You know, I want to have a rich dad. So I'm going to go back to my mother's womb and see if I can't uh, come out in a better circumstance. Those kinds of options are not available. We're dealt a certain hand, I guess you can say, a certain hand of cards, and we have to play that hand. We can't just muck our hand, as they say in poker, and say, oh, I want a different hand. Why don't you uh, deal me another set of cards? It doesn't work that way, does it? It doesn't work that way. And we need to be humble enough to accept the life that we are given, the circumstances that we are given. If I'm born into a poor country, then I have to be humble about that and say, okay, I'm going to make this a little bit richer. I'm going to make this a richer country, not only for myself, but for others as well. Or if I'm born into a rich country, then I have to be humble about that and understand the responsibility that I'm given as a person who is a citizen of a rich country, to use those resources for the rest, for the sake of the rest of the world. And if I'm born uh, into this world as a second generation, then I also have to be humble about that. Not to say, oh, I'm going to deny that. Well, you cannot deny it. I'm going to deny that I'm a second generation. I'm just going to live as if God doesn't exist, as if the principle doesn't exist, as if the principle isn't true. Well, there's a problem there. When we, when in our lives we have a lot of laws, right? And we cannot just pretend that those laws don't exist. I cannot pretend that the income tax law does not exist. There are consequences because it does exist, and more so for God's situation. More so, I cannot pretend as if gravity doesn't exist. Can I stand on the top of a building and say, I don't believe in gravity? I choose not to believe in gravity. So I can step off of this building, and because I choose not to believe in gravity, nothing is going to happen to me. Well, that would be very foolish, right? That would be very foolish. So also to say, oh, okay, uh, my parents say that I was born into this world as a second generation, but I choose not to believe that. I choose not to believe in God. I choose not to believe in the principle. I choose not to believe that Trufa is the Messiah, so that I can just live my own life according to what I want to do. Well, in the first place, you're not living according to what you want to do. You're living according to how the world around you, the secular world around you, tells you should live. In other words, you are choosing to be brainwashed by the secular world around you, to accept their norms that they teach simply because they are more powerful in the world than God is right now in the short term. But denying that you are a second generation does not change you. You are still who you are. You are still who you are. And denying that simply brings consequences uh, that have to be dealt with. So we are not in charge of our own life, but we need to be humble to the mission that we are given. Children are And when a baby is born, uh, and the king has referred to this recently, not in public but more in private, a baby is born, and at that moment of birth, that child is given a certain mission. So recently, someone asked the king to give a name to an unborn child, and the king said, "No, we're going to wait till the child is born, because it's when the child is born that this mission is given." Let's close our Rima for today, John chapter 12 and Cheonseongyang 14:65. All right. Yes, I see J. Horst Ko. Yeah, yes, a very difficult situation. Sadly, many second generation did go the other way. That is true. The majority, perhaps a large majority, have gone the other way. But I believe that they will, at least many of them, will return. And there is always hope, and there is always a way back. Just I want people to know that there's always a way back. I hear about some. I haven't seen this, but I hear about some second generation committing suicide, and that kind of thing. We never know why a person commits suicide, so I don't pretend to know these situations. But it could be that there is this struggle between their original mind and their conscience, and what they know, and then what they about who they are, and then what the world tells them that they ought to be, and so there's a struggle. But that can be resolved. That can be resolved. So please don't lose hope. Please don't lose hope. Right. Let's go to the news this morning. I want to go to an article on as the Trump Kim summit approaches now, just a week and a day from today. Things are beginning to happen. This is a very important spiritual event, spiritually and providentially. I can see that this is very important. That this is happening. This would be the first time of North Korea. Father met Kim Il Sung in what was it, 1991, and now Kim Il Sung's grandson is meeting President Trump, who is a very important providential figure in today's world. And that's happening in a week, and things are beginning to stir up. Things are beginning to happen in Spirit World. Spirit World, I think, is getting excited about this, and so we will see many things happening. And we see something happening in North Korea right now. In Reuters this morning, this article was updated just a couple of hours ago, published last night. North Korea shakes up top military brass ahead of Trump summit, says a U.S. official. Coming out of Seoul and Washington, Reuters reports North Korea's top 3 military officials have been removed from their posts. A senior U.S. official said. The move, analysts said on Monday, could support efforts by the North's young leader to jumpstart economic development and engage with the world. So Reuters is putting that spin on it. They're putting this interpretation on this change in military leadership, that this is Kim Jong-un's effort to, what do they say? Jumpstart economic development and engage with the world. So they are sort of lifting up Kim Jong-un, aren't they? Saying, oh, here we have a young man who wants to develop his country, and he wants to engage with the world. And so he's getting rid of the old guard, the old conservatives that are bad. That is Reuters' spin. I would put a different spin on it. We don't know exactly. All right, so maybe I don't know any more than Reuters, and maybe Reuters knows more than I do. I don't know, but I have a different spin. That Kim Jong-un, as he gets ready to leave the country and go to Singapore, apparently it's about 3,000 miles away, and he's going to be gone for a few days. He needs to make sure that there isn't a coup d'etat in his country while he is gone. So it would make sense that he would stir things up so that because when a leader is in a position for a certain period of time, that leader develops a certain following among his subordinates. His subordinates follow the leader rather than Kim Jong Un, the dictator. So if the leadership is changed, then a new leader comes in, and he doesn't have that kind of following among that same group of subordinate. It would be more difficult for him to one morning announce, "Hey, you know what? We're going to go out and take over the country." The first leader, if he's been there for a few years, he has the respect of the subordinates, and they say, "Yeah, we'll follow you to the death," and they really will. So if he says, "Hey, let's take over the country one day," then they'll be more likely to follow him and say, "Yeah, okay, let's do that." Whereas if a new leader comes in, the subordinates are saying, "Well, who's this guy? We don't know him," and they're still developing that respect, that relationship of trust with this new leader. So one way to avoid a coup d'etat in the absence of Kim Jong-un would be for him to change the leadership, right? So that's the way that I look at it. I'm not so charitable towards Kim Jong-un. This is a man who killed his own uncle, who killed his own half brother, because they presented some challenge to his power. His uncle Chang Song-tek was close to China, and China was trying to sort of guide Kim Jong-un through Chang Song-tek, and and China has always, I say always, China for a long time has wanted North Korea to follow its example, this sort of strange marriage, this hybrid between communism, Marxism, and capitalism, of having a capitalist economy led by a Marxist dictatorship. China believes that it has sort of come up with a model that can sort of make socialism or Marxism succeed, communism succeed. And so it has wanted North Korea to adopt that model as well. And they were trying to work through Chang Song-tek, Kim Jong-un's uncle, that is the husband of his father's sister. They've been working through Chang Song-tek. They had been working through Chang Song-tek to get Kim Jong-un to follow that model. But Kim Jong-un assassinated or killed him, executed him. There was this big meeting of all the leadership, and then maybe we've seen the video. I don't know if you've seen it, but there was this big meeting of all the leaders of the military were there, or whatever, big hall, a lot of leaders there, and some guys come in and yank this guy out of his seat and take him away, and he is killed. And Kim Jong-un is watching this, was killed, and then his half brother is killed by a nerve agent in the passenger terminal of an international airport of a foreign country in Malaysia, in Kuala Lumpur airport. So for us to turn around and say, okay, this guy is a young guy who wants to develop his country and engage with foreign countries, come on, all of a sudden, President Trump used to call Kim Jong-un a rocket man and all sorts of other names, and really was calling him out. And suddenly now he's saying, "Oh, he's a great guy. We respect him and everything." I can understand that. That's part of the negotiating sort of tactic. I can understand that, and I'm not going to criticize President Trump for that. But he is not that, right? He's not a great guy. He does not deserve our respect, and he does not deserve to be lifted up like this. And for a media organization like Reuters to do this, I think is it's, I would say, inexcusable. I have certain respect for the Reuters news agency, but writing about Kim Jong-un this way is inexcusable. He's jumpstart economic development and engage with the world. He's trying to save his own big, giant size ASS, all right? So that's what he's trying to do. Kim Jong-un is preparing for a high-stakes summit with the U.S. President Donald Trump in Singapore on June 12th, the first such meeting between a North Korean leader and a sitting U.S. president. The U.S. official who spoke on Sunday on condition of anonymity was commenting on a report by South Korea's Yonhap news agency that all three of the North's top military officials were believed to have been replaced. Kim's motivation remains unclear, but and the ruling party to tighten control over the Korean People's Army at a critical time of international engagement and domestic development. So, okay, so Reuters is kind of hinting now at what I just said, right? To tighten control. Tighten control means preventing a coup d'etat, basically what that means. At a critical time of international engagement and domestic development. Quote, if Kim Jong-un is set on making peace with the U.S. and South Korea and dealing away at least part of the nuclear program, he will have to put the KPA's influence in a box and keep it there, said Ken Gauss, director of the International Affairs Group of CNA, a nonprofit research and analyst organization. So this is something different now. So if Kim Jong-un really is serious and about dealing away or negotiating away some of his nuclear weapons, I can see that would actually be a motivation for a coup d'etat, wouldn't it? Because if the military says, hey, we put all this money in and we put all this effort in to developing these nuclear weapons because we believe that nuclear weapons guarantee our safety, in other words, the safety of our regime. And now Kim Jong-un is going to give them away? Are you kidding me? No, we don't want that. We're going to get rid of him. We're going to keep the weapons and get rid of Kim Jong-un. So that kind of thinking could very easily come about. In Japan, at the end of World War II, in August, the emperor made a public announcement on August 15th, noon on August 15th, he made his speech over radio about basically saying that Japan was giving up, was surrendering. And it's a very famous speech, bearing the unbearable, this kind of thing. But there's, if you look into it, that speech was actually put on it was actually not a live speech, but it was on a record. And because, at that time they didn't have tape recordings, they had the ability to record a person's voice on a vinyl record and play that over the radio then. So that record was recorded a day or two before August 15th. And then even between the time of its recording and the actual playing, there was a lot of intrigue and effort by some elements of the Japanese military at that time to steal that record and to prevent this announcement from going out because the military wanted to keep fighting. So and I think something similar could happen in North Korea, where if, and I don't know if this is true, I don't know if Kim Jong-un, I have my doubts that Kim Jong-un is really going to deal away part of his nuclear program. But if he is, then the North Korean military would certainly be upset about that, and they would want to somehow prevent it, perhaps through a coup d'etat or something like that. So, this analyst is saying he's assuming, he also says if, also puts an if clause in there. Says if Kim Jong-un is set on making peace with the U.S. and dealing with at least part of his nuclear program, then he will have to put KPA's influence in a box. Yeah, so in other words, he will have to put the military's influence in a box. And I don't know if put the military's influence in a box at this point. Boy, that's like trying to put the genie back in the bottle. I don't know if he can do that. And we're assuming that he wants to, right? That he wants to deal with it, and that's a big assumption because but if he wants to, he's in trouble. No, he's in trouble. If he genuinely wants to deal away part of the nuclear program in return for economic development, which I don't think he does, but if he is, I don't think he can do it. So it doesn't really matter either way. this reshuffle has brought to the fore the officers who can do just that. They are loyal to Kim Jong-un and no one else. Then we have a sentence in there that we can skip. The United States is seeking a negotiated end to North Korea's nuclear weapons program, and U.S. officials believe there was some dissension in the military about Kim's approaches to South Korea and the United States. Well, believe, to have a belief, you don't necessarily have to have any evidence. I mean, if this is true, that means that the military is taking Kim Jong-un for his word, which I am not. But maybe the military is. Maybe the military is saying, this kid really is serious. And he is a kid, you understand. I mean, he's 30, he was born in either 83 or 84, I think. So from the perspective of the military, he is a child. And the grown-ups in the military may be saying, in other words, grown-ups and people in their 60s, 70s, 80s, may be saying, we may be in trouble here. Someone needs to talk to this kid because we don't want him to actually go ahead with what we think he might be doing. To talk, and China's nervous about this summit. I know that. China's nervous about it. Maybe the military is nervous about it too. Saying, we don't know what's going to happen here with this meeting between our boss and that big Satan Trump. We don't know what's going to happen. And it's possible that for that reason too, that there's possibility of a coup d'etat or something going on in North Korea. Then Reuters says Trump wants North Korea to denuclearize or get rid of its nuclear arsenal. So, that's, of course, the U.S.'s understanding of denuclearization, of North Korea getting rid of its nuclear arsenal. North Korea has a different definition of denuclearization. For them, denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula means that the United States will remove its nuclear umbrella of protection from the Korean Peninsula, from South Korea, and it will no longer. It will give up the ability. It will forfeit the ability to threaten North Korea with its nuclear weapons. President Trump said, you think you have a nuclear button? I've got a bigger nuclear button. Well, North Korea wants President Trump to give up that nuclear button, at least with respect to North Korea. So that's why these negotiations are not going to go well. And if North Korea holds on to that view, then it's going to fail, because President Trump will never accept that. The United States will never accept the idea of not protecting its ally South Korea, or not protecting Japan with its nuclear weapons. Trump wants North Korea to denuclearize or get rid of its nuclear arsenal in return for relief from economic sanctions. North Korea's leadership is believed to regard nuclear weapons as crucial to its survival, while Kim said he has plans to focus on economic development. So that's a very interesting sentence. So that sentence is saying that there is a difference of opinion between North Korea's leadership and Kim Jong-un. And if that's the case, Kim Jong-un is in trouble, because he is only in power because of the military. His father passed, and Kim Jong-un was put in there. He was only in his 20s at the time that he was put in there. His about 27-ish or something like that. How is it possible that a child, all right, he's a little more than 18, so he's not technically not a child, but yeah, come on, he is a child, 27 years old, can move into a position like that and secure his power. It's only because the establishment, the North Korean establishment, the leadership needed him. They needed him. They needed a son of Kim Jong-il. They needed a grandson of Kim Il-sung. Because in North Korea, lineage is important. You guys, Hak Ja-han, are you listening? Even in North Korea, they understand the importance of lineage, okay? Hak Ja-han, are you listening? They understand the importance of lineage. And they had to have someone with what they call the Paektu lineage. The Paektu lineage, Mount Paektu is the highest mountain on the Korean Peninsula. It's actually on the border between Korea and China, and North Korea has given it sort of a spiritual, although they don't believe in spirit, but they believe that. But they've given it spiritual, or in their terms, perhaps magical. No, actually, it's spiritual. They've given it spiritual significance, and they have this whole mythology about the Kim lineage being sort of born on Mount Paektu and stuff like that, even though Kim Il-sung was actually born, I think, in Russia, in the Soviet Union. But the Paektu lineage is how they refer to Kim Il-sung's lineage. And they say we have to be loyal to the Paektu lineage. Yeah, they believe in lineage. Lineage is extremely important to them. So the North Korean establishment needed a valid member of the Paektu lineage to lead their country, to be their sort of the face. And yes, Kim Jong-un has the ability to kill pretty much anybody he wants. He can get up one morning and say, "Off with your head," and that person's going to die. But that power is given to him by the military leadership that surrounds him. And he cannot exist without that military leadership. They cannot exist without him. So it's kind of a symbiotic relationship that exists there in North Korea. So if there's a difference of opinion where the military leadership wants to hang on to the nuclear weapons and Kim Jong-un wants to have economic development, which I'm not convinced he does. But if there is this difference in opinion, which this article is suggesting there is, then Kim Jong-un is in trouble. Very much in trouble. Let's see what else it says here. The U.S. officials did not identify the three ousted military officials. Citing an unidentified intelligence official, Yonhap said No Wang-chul, the first vice minister of the Ministry of People's Armed Forces, had replaced Park Yong-sik as defense chief, while Ri Myung-soo was replaced by his deputy, Ri Yong-gil. North Korean state media previously confirmed that Army General Kim Soo-gil had replaced Kim Jong-gak as director of the KPA's General Political Bureau. The White House, State Department, CIA, and Office of the Director of National Intelligence did not respond immediately to requests for official comment. South Korea's Unification and Defense Ministries declined to confirm the report, while an official at the Unification Ministry said the government was watching the North leadership very closely. South Korean Foreign Minister Kang Kyung-hwa had a 15-minute phone call with U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo on Monday to discuss the upcoming summit between Kim and Trump, the Foreign Ministry in Seoul said. So that'll be Monday, that would be today, but that's Monday, Korea time. Wow, I hope Mike Pompeo didn't have to step too late for that. Given the military's secondary role in the North's nuclear missile programs, and I don't understand, is this a misprint? Why would they say military's secondary role in the North's nuclear missile programs? I would think that primary role. Reuters needs to explain why they said secondary. Given the military's secondary role in the North, I really think that should be primary. I'm disappointed that this article does not explain why they're saying secondary. Who's primary then? Given the military's secondary role in the North's nuclear and missile programs, the moves are likely more about installing a younger, even more trusted cohort of officials. In other words, not likely to, or less able to bring about a coup d'état. Even more trusted cohort of officials they should say whom, right? Kim Jong-un can rely on as he confronts a variety of domestic and international issues, said Michael Madden, a North Korea expert at Johns Hopkins University's 38 North website. The nuclear weapons are a side issue, he said. The moves are likely linked in part to Kim Jong-un's drive to have the military take a bigger role in critical infrastructure projects. That could explain why newly appointed director of the KPA's General Political Bureau, Army General Kim Soo-gil, accompanied Kim Jong-un on a field guidance trip to a beach tourist zone with other officials, Madden said. Kim Jong-un is also likely expecting to receive more international economic aid and investment soon as part of the ongoing talks, and he wants to prevent corruption that plagued some past projects, Madden said. Boy, that's taking a big leap. I don't know what Madden has as his sources, but to say that Kim Jong-un is some kind of an idealist that wants to prevent corruption. Yeah, he wants to prevent his immediate subordinates from getting too rich, of course. He needs to keep the population as a whole poor so as to control them. Not so poor that they starve, as they were doing some years during his father's reign. But he can't afford to let, because then with resources, they gain the power to overthrow him. So he needs to control that, and to prevent corruption that plagues some. I don't know what Reuters is really building this guy up, Kim Jong-un, up as some kind of a patriot, idealistic patriot, and I don't know what kind of sources they have for that, what kind of grounds they have for doing that. No, I mean he's still the same little rocket man that President Trump was talking about a few months ago. All of the newly promoted officials are younger than their predecessors, including 63-year-old Ri Yong-gil, who is 21 years younger than Ri Myung-soo. So the guy he replaced was 84 years old, right? But he's still 63 years old. This points to two things: that the consolidation of Kim's power as the sole leader of North Korea, and strengthened cooperation between the North's party and military as the country works toward further economic development, said Yang Moo-jin, professor at the University of North Korean Studies in Seoul. They're all young but capable people, Yang said. Lower-level U.S.-North Korean talks to prepare for the summit are continuing, but have made only, quote, halting progress, unquote, according to a second U.S. official briefed on the discussions. That official said U.S. negotiators' efforts to press for definitions of immediate, comprehensive, verifiable, and irreversible denuclearization by North Korea had run into opposition from the White House. That official said U.S. negotiators' efforts had run into opposition from the White House. That's interesting. But there's somehow a difference of opinion between the U.S. negotiators and the White House. In a remarkable shift in tone 8 days after canceling the summit, citing Pyongyang's open hostility, Trump welcomed North Korea's former intelligence chief Kim Yong-chol to the White House on Friday, exchanging smiles and handshakes. Yonhap reported that Kim Yong-chol had transited Beijing on Monday on his way back to Pyongyang from the United States. All three of the new military officials have at least some experience interacting with foreign delegations, a factor that is critical as Kim seeks to line up meetings with leaders from the United States, China, Russia, and Syria. They are shaping these guys up because there is going to be a lot of foreign interaction, Madden said. They know to sit there and not get too drunk at the parties. They know how to behave themselves. Okay. Well, of course, Syria, I mean, all of a sudden Assad wants to go to North Korea and talk to Kim Jong-un. Now, I have no idea what that's all about, but it's certainly strange. And frankly, I think Kim Jong is a little bit busy right now. So I don't know when Assad is going to be going. Has that been in the news when he's going to be going? But I think Kim Jong-un probably wants to focus on Trump for the moment. So anyway, so things are getting interesting in North Korea. And we'll see what happens there. We'll see what happens. Sorts of, conspiracy theory or rumors are flying about that maybe, Kim Jong-un will be kidnapped on his way to Singapore or something like that. Because apparently he does have to make a stop off in China. From what some people are saying, North Korea actually doesn't have it to Singapore, and will have to stop somewhere in China on his way. And so what will happen on that stop off? Just a little search on Syria here, see what's going on there. North Korea, Syria's Assad will visit Kim. Of course, we are both. It's not too strange because, well, they're both dictators, and birds of a feather, and both like to kill their own people. Let me wait for this article to come up here. It's a New York Times article, and it was filed yesterday, maybe in this morning's editions. Let me see when Assad is going to visit. New York Times, North Korea says Syria's Assad will visit Kim. And here's a photograph. President Bashar al-Assad of Syria was visited by North Korea's newly appointed ambassador to Damascus, Moon Jong-nam, on Wednesday. Wow, another moon, huh? Let's see. Out of Tokyo, President Bashar al-Assad of Syria plans to visit North Korea's leader Kim Jong-un, the North state-run news media said on Sunday. Suggesting that Mr. Kim is continuing his outreach to American adversaries, even as he courts President Trump. So, when reporters write a story like this, they always have to give some kind of an explanation as to why, who, what, where, when, why, why. They always try to get that why. But in a lot of cases, especially here, they're guessing. Suggesting that Mr. Kim is suggesting means, I'm just guessing here, folks. That's what suggesting means. Suggesting that Mr. Kim is continuing his outreach to American adversaries, even as he courts President Trump. Who knows why they're meeting? The report, which was not confirmed by Syria, came just days after Mr. Trump announced that he was. If Mr. Assad were to visit Pyongyang, it would be the first time that Mr. Kim hosted a meeting with another head of state in the North Korean capital. Wow. The optics are horrendous, given that Kim Jong-un is trying to posture as a good guy, said Soo Mi Terry, the Korea chair at the Center for Strategic and International Studies in Washington. Hosting Assad, one of the worst butchers on the planet, as your first foreign leader, is not a good PR move. Mr. Assad and Mr. Kim have much in common. Both are heirs to family dynasties in countries that have long thumbed their noses at the international system, saying it was biased against them and in favor of their foes. They also have a shared interest in developing powerful weapons. After years of isolation, Mr. Kim has aggressively pursued diplomatic relations in recent months. Last week in Pyongyang, he hosted Sergei V. Lavrov, the foreign minister of Russia, the first senior Russian official to meet with the young North Korean leader. Since the end of March, Mr. Kim has twice met with President Xi Jinping of China. Well, he's been wanting to meet Xi Jinping for 7 years, but Xi Jinping didn't want to deal with him. Xi Jinping visited South Korea, but not the North. In April, he crossed the demilitarized zone separating the two Koreas to meet with the President Moon Jae-in of South Korea, and two leaders met again. So Reuters and New York Times are both suggesting that Kim Jong-un has had some kind of an epiphany. All right, so all of a sudden he's a good guy. So all of a sudden he's interested in economic development. All of a sudden he's interested in engaging with foreign leaders. So he's already been in that. He's already been in power for 7 years. All right, so something's going on. The Korean Central News Agency reported that Mr. Assad said he intended to visit Pyongyang when he received the credentials of the new North Korean ambassador, Moon Jong-nam, on May 30th in Damascus. I am going to visit the DPRK, the agency reported. Mr. Assad is saying using the initials of North Korea's official name, the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. It was unclear if Mr. Assad had promised a concrete visit or had merely suggested it as a possibility out of diplomatic politeness. Any analysts questioned whether the report represented the true intentions of Mr. Assad, given that it gave no date or details. David Maxwell, Associate Director for the Center for Security Studies at Georgetown University, said that Ambassador Moon may have misunderstood Mr. Assad, or his aides may have misreported what they thought the Syrian leader said. Given the looming summit with Mr. Trump, Mr. Maxwell said he was puzzled by the North's announcement of a possible visit from the Syrian leader, who has been entangled in a bloody civil war and condemned by the West for the use of chemical weapons against its own citizens. I am struggling to figure it out and trying to put aside my Western bias and look at it from Kim Jong-un's perspective, Mr. Maxwell said. If they think it enhances their legitimacy, then they certainly don't have a good understanding of the international community and certainly what the U.S. is going to think about it. United Nations experts accused North Korea of shipping materials to the Syrian government that could be used in the production of chemical weapons during the brutal civil war it has been fighting against the rebels since 2011. The materials were part of at least 40 shipments that North Korea made to Syria between 2012 and 2017 that could be used for both civilian and military purposes, the United Nations report said. North Korean technicians had also been seen working at chemical weapons and missile facilities in Syria. Mr. Trump has twice ordered airstrikes against Syria to punish Mr. Assad for suspected chemical attacks on civilians, which we know that there's been some ground report on the scene reports suggesting that those attacks actually did not take place. North Korea and Syria have long maintained warm ties dating to the reign of Kim Il-sung, North's founding leader. The shipments reported by the United Nations were only the most recent examples of apparent weapons cooperation between the two countries. So North Korea supported Syria during the Arab-Israeli War in October 1973, sending troops, including pilots and missile personnel. And analysts said that by announcing a prospective visit from Mr. Assad, North Korea risked raising Mr. Trump's ire and prompting him to cancel the Singapore summit again. Assad's trip could again derail the newly resurrected summit, or at the least cast a dark shadow, said Bruce Klingner, a Korea specialist at the Heritage Foundation in Washington. Of all the dictators in the world to meet, Kim had to pick the one that the U.S. has recently attacked and for which President Trump has particular disdain. In remarks quoted by the Korea Central News Agency, Mr. Assad said the Syrian government will, as ever, fully support all policies and measures of the DPRK leadership and invariably strengthen and develop the friendly ties with the DPRK. Okay. Let's see what else. Although Mr. Trump and officials from the North have seemed to have smoothed things over, analysts said in announcing a visit from Mr. Assad, North Korea could be maneuvering for another tactical advantage in advance of the summit. Okay. Perhaps, said John D. Pollack, a senior fellow at the Brookings Institution, North is seeking to send the message that they've got other options of one kind or another. All right. And there's an article on Breitbart that I want to go to now, where Newt Gingrich is saying that this summit still may not happen. So let's go to that. But in the meantime, while that's coming up, I still think that China about this summit. China, the reason that they've called Kim Jong-un onto the carpet twice in recent months, within the last 4 to 6 weeks, I think, is that they don't want this summit to happen. I think, or they want to keep a very tight rein on Kim Jong-un if it does happen. I think China would definitely prefer that this summit be canceled, but it needs to be canceled in a way that the cancellation happens is done by the U.S. And the U.S. takes the responsibility for the cancellation. What happened last time was that North Korea, right after Kim Jong-un came back from China, North Korea started saying bad things about Bolton, about Vice President Pence and stuff like that, and making President Trump angry. And and North Korea says, hey, we may not have the summit after all. So Trump says, okay, forget it then, go. You know, we'll just go with our other options. And that put the blame on North Korea, and that's why North Korea had to come back and say, oh no, we didn't mean that. Please, let's go ahead with the summit. That's why they had to come back, because although the summit was canceled, it was canceled in a way that put the blame on North Korea, and that's bad. North Korea doesn't want that. China doesn't want that. So now it may be that they're trying to get the summit canceled again, but this time do it the right way from their perspective, with the U.S. Taking the blame. Newt Gingrich and North Korea talks still may not occur. Okay, let's open this up and see what his reasoning is. Newt Gingrich still has friends in high places, so he may have information that we don't have, or may not. I don't know. Maybe he's just guessing. Who knows? Newt Gingrich. Let's see here. Get down to the body of the article. Yeah, I think that China may be trying to move. And all of a sudden, he's interested in economic development. He's interested in engagement with the international community. Then, in that case, if that's true, then it has to happen. Here, Sunday on AM 970s, the Cats Roundtable, hosted by John. Oh boy, what happened to the people with simple names? How come they don't get famous? John Katsimatidis, whatever, former House Speaker Newt Gingrich warned President Donald Trump still may not have a summit with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. Still may not occur. If the meeting does occur, they may get a breakthrough or they may not get a breakthrough. I mean, I could have said that. It may happen or it may not happen. If it does happen, there may be a breakthrough or may not be a breakthrough. I mean, anybody can say that. He continued, this guy and his family have run this dictatorship. It's the worst police state in the world. There's some pretty bad police states in the world. They have a terrible system of locking up people. They have lowered the height of the average North Korean through malnutrition, and that's true. And they have poured all of that money into nuclear weapons and ballistic missiles in a desperate effort to be important. Trump is asking him to give up something that he has spent his entire lifetime and his father and grandfather's lifetimes trying to acquire. And they're not going to do it easily. Okay, well, so I guess Gingrich doesn't have any information that we don't have. We'll see. But it will be interesting to see what Kim Jong-un is really trying to do. We haven't heard from him really yet. And I think June 12th will be important in that respect, at least, to know exactly what is Kim Jong-un trying to do. Has he really had this kind of this epiphany? Is he really interested in economic development? I don't think he is. I haven't seen any evidence of that. I think he's just trying to stay alive. And maybe that is his motivation. You know, maybe he gets to Singapore and says, "Hey, Mr. Trump, take me back with you. Can I hitch a ride on your plane back to Washington?" That would be interesting. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know what's going to happen. But Gingrich is just speculating. And that's the kind of speculation that anyone can do right now. All right, let's see. What shall we do? We have to take our breaks on camera. We cannot go to commercial or anything like that. I think I'll just keep on going if you don't mind. I may have to go get a drink of water at some point here fairly soon, but that's okay. I hope that you will forgive me if I have to do that. Right, let's go to the Drudge headlines this morning and see what's going on there. So meanwhile, Drudge is much more concerned, I guess, with the domestic politics and President Trump. Coup d'etats. I guess the effort by the Democratic Party to somehow get rid of President Trump is continuing. And here we have Giuliani saying that Trump can pardon himself. And White House moves to head off historic subpoena, growing opposition to Mueller interview. Giuliani, in no case can he be subpoenaed. Then we hear Facebook data deals revealed, deep access, contradicts tests, question mark. And Guatemala volcano eruption kills 25, injures hundreds. Hawaii evacuees leave homes as new lava threatens on Big Island. 5.8 magnitude quake rattles, record 500 plus in last day. And Warriors big favorites versus Cavs in finals. Yeah, Drudge, apparently, I guess he's a fan of the Cavaliers. He keeps building them up. Google apologizes for labeling Senator bigot in search. A California Republican was senator, I guess, was labeled as a bigot in search results. Nunez warns may need to testify if bias does not stop. Hammers socials for censoring Drudge report. New Italian government vows to create jobs, deport migrants. So they finally came to an agreement. I guess apparently the two parties that were trying to form a government went ahead and got a new guy for the economy minister, and the president finally approved. Latest migrant tool of resistance on border is video app. Gene test shows more breast cancer patients can skip chemo. Woman says she killed her husband. Trio reach Earth from ISS, the International Space Station, with football slated for World Cup. The World Cup is being played this month and next month. And DNA for sale. Ancestry wants your spit, your DNA, and your trust. Should you give them all three? That's Ancestry.com, right? You don't want to put your DNA into some database someplace. I don't think that's a good idea. I think that's a pretty bad idea. Big brokers rent and sell. Yes, the DNA. Yeah. American Airlines warns of fare increases if oil remains high. Uber, Lyft drivers pinched. Yeah, because of oil prices, gasoline prices. Wire says the Tea Party class of House Republicans fade. Bannon says never mind. And California, Gavin Newsom was I guess won his. Nearly half of Bay Area residents want to leave. Wow. Silicon Valley estate gets $33 million discount. Diane von Furstenberg, ready for her third act. I want to be an oracle. Okay, well, go ahead. Be what you want to be. Yeah, that's what they say, right? Be what you want to be. Tourist referred to criminal trial for insulting Egypt on Facebook. Freedom. Simon Cowell hasn't touched a cell phone in months. Well, that's because he can hire people to touch it for him, I guess. Yeah. Did they just put in a new one up here? Solo continues to nosedive at box office. That's the most recent Star Wars movie. And Bernie takes on Disney. People aren't reading anymore. People don't know how to read. Dowd, Obama is just too good for us. Oh, yes. Pretty soon they'll be choosing him for sainthood. A community organizes against his library plans, against Obama's library plans. Bill Clinton, haven't heard from him in a while, but he says, I couldn't be elected now because I don't like embarrassing people. Newsflash, hashtag me too. That's why you can't get elected. Oh boy. How hacker proved cops used a secret government phone tracker to find him. German far-right leader sparks furor with Hitler remarks. President apologizes to gays for decades of injustice. A psychiatrist, a demonic possession is real. Victims seeking exorcism should not be ignored. Well, I'm glad they realize that the spirit world exists. Historic exodus leaving Venezuela without teachers, doctors, and electricians. Well, who's going to turn out the lights if the electricians are gone? China warning on dictatorship chant chills Hong Kong vigil. And that's an important story because June 4th is the anniversary of the Tiananmen massacre. And this article refers to that. So we'll go into that in just a minute here. Video, dancing FBI agent accidentally shoots bar patron. Yeah. So this FBI agent is in a bar and he's dancing and he's got his gun because he's an FBI agent. He's got his gun. And the gun falls to the floor somehow. I don't know how it fell to the floor. Maybe he was doing somersaults. I don't know what. But anyway, the gun falls to the floor. And he reaches down to pick it up. And the gun goes off. So apparently we'll watch the, I can't show videos. But, he must have touched the trigger while he was picking it up. It's probably, maybe he had a few. But this is interesting because the gun did not go off as a result of the impact with the floor. And I don't know exactly what kind of gun he had, but my understanding is that most handguns are built so that they don't go off with a hard impact with the floor, or if you bump into the wall, or so. The only way that a gun will go off is if the trigger is pulled. And apparently that's what happened in this case. He dropped the weapon. He reached down to pick it up, and I guess he picked it up with one of his fingers on the trigger. This FBI agent, are probably, as of this moment, perhaps we should be saying ex-FBI agent, former FBI agent. No, I think it won't take too long for him to be fired. Should have received more training. I don't know, but it was and it says accidentally shot. It wasn't accidentally; it was negligently shot. Negligently shot a bar patron, I would say, is a more accurate way to put that headline. Crayfish cuts off own claw to escape boiling pot. Report secret papers prove Iran trying to build a bomb. Israel to join largest international Navy exercise. Britain says militant Islamist threat to stay high and may rise further. Duh. You don't say. I'm glad somebody's waking up. Maybe Kim Jong-un isn't the only one who's having an epiphany. Faces summer of knife mayhem. Yeah, you can look forward to that. Cancer preventing pizza. Okay, that sounds good. Another fake vet, that's a veterinarian, turns himself in after deadly neutering. So pets are dying because they're being neutered by fake veterinarians. Okay, let's see. Los Angeles restaurant stimulating all five senses. Physics experiment detects particle that shouldn't exist. There you go. So what are you going to do? So, all right, so an experiment has detected a particle that shouldn't exist. What are we going to do? Option A, deny that the particle exists, even though the experiment says it exists. And so by doing that, we can maintain our current view of the universe. Option B, change our view of the universe. Something, and I bring this up because something is true with a religious doctrine as well. When we have a certain doctrine, and then something happens that contradicts those beliefs, we can deny the reality and maintain our beliefs, or we can dig a little bit deeper and try to understand this God's cosmos, God's creation more deeply and more profoundly. The religious doctrine is not just something that we make up. Religious doctrine is an effort to understand the cosmos, and our understanding is always imperfect. So our doctrine is always imperfect. It will continue. They choose to simply, go on believing that she cannot betray Father because and just deny all the evidence that she does. Whereas realistic people who want to understand God's creation, who truly want to understand God's creation, God's providence, are saying, okay, this is something new that we need to understand God's providence more deeply. And so, and we do understand now more deeply. Understand that, okay, Father made these declarations about Hak Ja Han on certain conditions. At one point now we know that now that he made a declaration of her perfect union with him, based on her promise that she would live that way, but she broke that promise, and so Father's declaration then is invalid. But Father tried every way that he could to get her to unite with him, because providence would have been so much easier, so much smoother, involving so much less sacrifice, if only she had chosen to unite with him, really truly unite with him at the perfection stage. but she didn't, and she hasn't, and she isn't. She's betraying him. She betrayed him. She is betraying him now, and she's continuing to betray him every day that she lives. So we need to accept that reality and understand that Father has chosen someone to replace her. In where Father's compared the course of the True Mother to a marathon, and he said that everybody has the right to enter the marathon, and everyone who enters the marathon has the right to finish first. But only one person can actually finish first. Only the person who crosses the finish line, who is the first, will be the winner. And Hak Ja Han was in the marathon, and she was winning. She was winning. She was ahead by a long distance. But short of the goal, she stumbled and fell. Fell there in both meanings there. And so our True Mother, Kang Hyun-sil, passed her and became the first to cross that finish line. And some people I know continue to believe that Hak Ja Han will someday repent and will return to her position as True Mother. But that position is now occupied by someone else. Kang Hyun-sil has already occupied that position, and she is our True Mother. She is our eternal True Mother. Kang Hyun-sil is our eternal True Mother, and she is True Father's eternal Hyun-sil Kang. And Hak Ja Han is someone who accomplished certain things. She bore to father 14 children, and that's an incredible accomplishment. But she did not cross the finish line. Or even if she crosses the finish line now, she is not the first to cross the finish line. So she cannot be the winner. She cannot receive that. She cannot receive that position of being the true mother anymore. So anyway, that comes from the physics experiment. Okay, but let's be clear about that, though. Let's be absolutely clear about that. And I know some people want to believe, but it's not what you want to believe. It's what's the reality. And we'll go through this article and we'll try to find some other resources on that situation, because it's been what, that was in 1989. Yes, that was in 89. So it's been what, 29 years now. So for a lot of people, this happened even before they were born. And so it will go through some materials to educate people exactly what happened. Of course, we don't exactly know what happened, but we know that a lot of people died. In Tiananmen Square, which is it's the big square in Beijing, basically. And there was a democracy movement, and it was put down, and by the Chinese military, by the People's Liberation Army, the military of the Chinese Communist Party. Right, not the military of the Chinese government. The Chinese government has no military. It's the military of the Chinese Communist Party, the CCP. So this is a Bloomberg article. And let's see if we can get down to the I guess about 99 years, and then it was returned to China. And when that happened, China promised that honor Hong Kong for 50 years, that they would not change it. Of course, they have not kept that promise, and this is becoming more and more apparent. For 28 years, tens of thousands of Hong Kong democracy advocates have marked the anniversary of the Tiananmen Square crackdown. Well, it was not a crackdown, it was a massacre, all right? Crackdown by rallying for political change and face new risk in doing so. At issue are a series of slogans chanted during a mass candlelight vigil in Victoria Park, specifically one demanding a, quote, end to one-party dictatorship, unquote. That act of defiance has come under new scrutiny after the former Chinese official in Hong Kong suggested that those who utter the phrase should be barred from running for office. So if you say end to one-party dictatorship, this official is saying, you should not be allowed to run for office. Wow. That is the environment that the people of China are living in. That is the environment. And that is in Hong Kong, which is relatively free. Relatively. And that's not saying much. While government officials haven't endorsed the view, pro-democracy lawmakers worry that such remarks could represent the latest Communist Party effort to curb free expression in the former British colony. In 2016, the Chinese government banned independence activists from public office, and local officials earlier this year barred a legislative candidate from running because she supported, quote, self-determination. No, I don't want self-determination. No. Don't want that. Because the Chinese Communist Party determines everything. Yeah. Quote, when you look around, the political space in Hong Kong is much tighter now, tighter than it was even 3 or 4 years ago, said Chris Min, convener of the Progressive Lawyers Group, which seeks to preserve Hong Kong's rule of law. Quote, Beijing's incursions on Hong Kong's freedoms might not look like much on their own, but when you put them all together, they are going to be fatal, unquote. Yeah. Hong Kong Chief Executive Carrie Lam's office didn't immediately respond to an email and phone call seeking comment Monday. The June 4th vigil commemorating the military crackdown. There you go, crackdown again. It's not crackdown. Crackdown can be when you go in and arrest people, right? That's a crackdown. This was a massacre where the military went in with tanks and shot live rounds at the demonstrators and killed people. Killed many people. We don't know. The Chinese Communist Party has made sure that we don't know. This was not a crackdown. This was a massacre. The military, Bloomberg says, crackdown on student protesters in Beijing in 1989. Well, not student protesters. They were democracy protesters. They were calling for democracy. Again, Bloomberg skirts that issue. Stands as an annual reminder of China's pledge to preserve colonial-era freedoms. That's an interesting phrase, isn't it? Colonial-era freedoms. But it shows that Hong Kong was freer as a colony than it is today. I mean, as a colony, you're not really free. But relative to today, Hong Kong was a lot freer then than it is today, because it's something worse than a colony today. It's been enslaved by the Chinese Communist Party. Stands as an annual reminder of China's pledge to preserve colonial-era freedoms and institutions in Hong Kong. 100,000 people gathered on a sweltering evening to hear speeches, sing protest songs, and view images of the Tiananmen. And to those who advocate an end to one-party rule in China, the idea, proposed in March by the city's sole representative to the national legislature, has been endorsed by Wang Guangya, the former top official for Hong Kong affairs. Such moves could threaten even sitting lawmakers, since China's National People's Congress stepped in 2016 to apply strict new standards for officials' oaths retroactively. Public discussion of the Tiananmen incident. Again, it's not an incident. It was a massacre. It was a massacre. Tiananmen incident is banned on the mainland, and President Xi Jinping has tightened controls on dissent since taking power in 2012. Scores of activists and lawyers. Xi has shown less patience for Hong Kong's activists as well, warning during a July visit that challenges to the party's rule he's basically an emperor. China's approach has undermined faith in the, quote, one party, two systems, unquote, framework government officials and businesses credit with maintaining Hong Kong's status as an international financial center. So that's what Bloomberg is interested in. They want Hong Kong to remain as an international financial center. They don't care about the massacre or whatever it is. I would say, can I get a drink of water, please? Speaking with my producer here, they don't care about the mask or anything like that. They just want to have it maintained as a international financial center. A survey by the American Chamber of Commerce in Hong Kong, thank you, by the Chamber of American Commerce, released Wednesday, it found that just more than half of the 230 members who responded believed there had been some erosion in the model. Come on. The other half are lying. A survey by the American Chamber of Commerce in Hong Kong, released Wednesday, found that just more than half of the 230 members, right? So these are members of the American Chamber of Commerce. Members of the American Chamber of Commerce, and only half believe that there had been some erosion in the model. It's been eroded drastically. So half believe there's been an erosion. The other half was lying through their teeth. The U.S. State Department report, also released last week, said that Xi's statements and other officials had diluted the high degree of autonomy outlined in the city's charter. As China becomes more repressive politically, it will only get worse, said Sunny Lo, a professor of political science at the HKU School of Professional and Continuing Education. Things are drifting toward one country, one system, in the minds of both Beijing officials and Hong Kong authorities, Lo said. Beijing loyalists argue moves to rein in Hong Kong's most radical activists were necessary after dozens of police were injured in a riot involving independent activists in 2016. The democratic opposition has also frustrated China's efforts to integrate the city by using protests and parliamentary maneuvering to block proposals. Still, the city's democratic lawmakers were expected to defy the call. A survey by the local Ming Pao newspaper found 23 out of 24 opposition lawmakers who participated planned to attend the vigil and join the chants, with the 25th objecting to the event on the grounds that Hong Kong residents should focus on local issues. Okay, Bloomberg needs a little bit of editing here, help here. Al Baker and chairman of the Hong Kong Alliance in support of democratic movements in China, the vigil organizer, predicted that Beijing wouldn't enforce the ban because doing so risked contradicting its own claims to multi-party cooperation. There also would be cost to China's international reputation. In policy, he said, I won't say they won't do it, but the price would be very high. All right, so I think Xi Jinping may do that, but probably not just yet. They still need a facade of, like it says here, multi-party cooperation. So they need to have the facade that they are democratic. The People's Republic of China does not, in the name of the country, they have not been so audacious as to put the word democratic as North Korea has, the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, DPRK. Word is, of course, very undemocratic, but China has not done that. So they obviously do not even want to pay lip service to democracy. But let's try to get some information on what else is happening on this with regard to Tiananmen. Let's see if I can get anything else right here. And the scandalous silence on U.S. campuses. Air pollution in Beijing was so bad this weekend you could barely see across Tiananmen Square. All right. Okay, let's see what the Guardian has to say about Tiananmen Square. Let's see when this article was published. Tiananmen Square, the silence is left by the massacre, an account of the Beijing atrocity and its repercussions using words banned by the Chinese government. This story was published, actually it was published last year, on 9th of June, but let's look at it anyway. Each year around the anniversary of June 4th, 1989, the Beijing massacre, words vanish from the Chinese internet. A comprehensive list of blocked words is published by China Digital Times, which keeps an extensive database. Digital censorship has pushed Chinese citizens to create an irreverent, ingenious, and hilarious counterlanguage of puns, gifs, memes, nicknames, and more to fill in these spaces otherwise left blank. I turn to those missing words to record the events of 1989 and the aftermath. 1. The demonstrations which daily brought up to 1 million people to Tiananmen Square began when Beijing students tried to mourn the sudden death of Hu Yaobang, a reformist leader who had been removed from office. So Bloomberg said that this was a student, they used the word student, or a student demonstration like that, but it was started by students, but a lot of other people joined in as well. And as this author says, 1 million people, up to 1 million people daily came to Tiananmen Square to demonstrate in favor of democracy. 2, the government accused the mourners of inciting rebellion, and the student movement was born. In the wake of 40 years of political turmoil that claimed the lives of at least 60 million people, the public square became not just ground zero for a democracy movement, but a space to remember the past, debate the present, and imagine the future. The world was watching when the government turned away from dialogue. 3,000 students began a hunger strike that lasted 10 days. This was in 1989. On 19 May, General Secretary Zhao Ziyang visited the students in the middle of the night. He told them, "I am sorry." The next day, the government imposed martial law and mobilized troops, and Zhao was placed under house arrest, where he would remain until his death in 2005. Zhao's children were denied permission to bury their father's ashes until 2015. On the night of June 3rd and the early hours of June 4th, people took to the streets to stop the tanks from reaching the student demonstrators. Fighting took place on the streets and intersections, and the People's Liberation Army opened fire with lead bullets. In other words, real bullets. The number of dead, including those crushed by tanks, remains unknown. The unprecedented and peaceful civil movement was transformed into the Beijing Massacre, or what the government calls the Tiananmen Incident, and what also Bloomberg also referred to as an incident, kowtowing to the Chinese Communist Party. On the morning of 4 June 1989, a line of tanks was stopped momentarily by a person whose identity has never been discovered and whose fate remains unknown. This is a very famous photograph of one man standing in front of a column of tanks. And apparently the driver of that lead tank could not bring himself to run over that man. But eventually he was removed and the tanks continued. On each anniversary, 27, 26, 25, 24, 23, and so on, numbers of every permutation, 6-4, 64, square of 8, 31 May, 89, etc., and even Baijiu, a liquor that sounds like 89, are suppressed on the Chinese internet. The name of the former premier, Li Peng, is temporarily banned alongside the names of victims, student leaders, workers, and activists in certain foreign media sites. Even sensitive word and internet block are disallowed. So many pages are inaccessible that 4 June is jokingly referred to by Chinese citizens as Internet Maintenance Day. Every June, parents and or spouses of the victims are placed under house arrest or removed from their homes and forbidden from public mourning. For 27 years, this was last year, so 27, Ding Jiling has been trying to grieve for her son, Jiang Jiling, who was shot by the army. She found a group, the Tiananmen Mothers, searching for those who shared the same fate. And this group of elderly bereaved are known as the Mothers of the Motherland. Their demand was simple: the right to mourn peacefully and in public. To remember, citizens post candles to commemorate the dead. They call for a silent vigil to pay respect to that day and honor the memory of that year. They ask citizens to wear black and take a walk. They call the massacre in Beijing a wound in history and remind one another to never forget these weeks that were the end of spring and the beginning of summer, a night when the empire besieged the city and the end of an era. The poet Bei Dao wrote, "Life's only a promise. Don't grieve for it. We knock down midnight's door, alone like a match polished into light." Today, 27 years later, again, this was last year, so now it's 28 years later, even the words yesterday and tomorrow are so politically charged, they disappear from the Chinese internet. Now, this is from a book by Madeline Thien, I guess you pronounce that, Thien, Thien or Thien. Title of the book is "Do Not Say We Have Nothing." The photograph of that lone protester in front of the column of tanks is attached to this article. Where we don't have any way of showing it to you, but I'm sure you've seen it. If you don't, you can look it up. Tiananmen Square massacre. Look up that word. and see what Google also, of course, is siding with the Chinese government. Here's another article. Why have so many Hong Kongers developed amnesia over the Tiananmen massacre? Tiananmen Square, 29 years after the crackdown. That's ABC News. China answer Tiananmen massacre, calls for justice. Sister of late Tiananmen activist Li Wangyang thanks Hong Kong for demanding justice for victims. Hong Kong march marks Tiananmen massacre. Bangkok Post 7 days ago. Tiananmen mother's right to Chinese president slamming crime against humanity. This is Radio Free Asia. China holds 2 activists ahead of Tiananmen massacre anniversary. Ginseng tea with honey. This is on the website is rfa.org. Here's a photograph of a group of women, of elderly women. The Tiananmen mothers meet for dinner in Beijing on February 2nd, 2015. Okay, this is very small. Let me increase the size of it. There we go. The relatives of those killed when Chinese People's Liberation Army put a bloody end to weeks of student-led democracy protests on Beijing's Tiananmen Square 29 years ago have called on Chinese President Xi Jinping to compensate them and to pursue those responsible. The Tiananmen Mothers victims group penned the letter to mark Monday's anniversary, calling the massacre a crime against humanity and calling on the government to make public all information related to the bloodshed, which is currently described by the ruling Chinese Communist Party as a necessary end to a counter-revolutionary rebellion. Oh yeah, they're right. It was a counter-revolutionary rebellion, yeah. Unfortunately, it failed. In the turbulent summer of 1989, this is a quotation from the mother's letter, the authorities sent in more than 100,000 fully armed and battle-ready troops to slaughter unarmed students and civilians in a massacre that was supposed to preserve national stability, unquote, the letter said. So the Chinese regime then showed that they wanted the same thing that the North Korean regime wants today, and that is regime security. Do not threaten the regime. That is what they wanted then. That's what they want now. They want their one-party dictatorship to continue. That is what North Korea is seeking now. This was a crime against humanity that seriously damaged our reputation as a nation. That's a quotation from the mothers. The group is fast dwindling. 51 of its members have died without seeing justice, in quotes, while the rest are battling growing ill health in their 70s and 80s, the letter said. Quote, in the space of a single night, our loved ones all died along the length of Chang'an Boulevard, bringing untold pain and suffering that would last for the rest of our lives, unquote, the relatives wrote. Quote, the June 4 tragedy is history now, but this disaster remains unresolved and its wounds have yet to heal, unquote. In 29 years of campaigning for 3 demands, a full revelation of any officially held information on the crackdown, compensation for the loved ones of those killed or maimed, and the pursuit of those responsible, the Tiananmen mothers have yet to receive a single official response. During the 29 years that this government has been in power, no one person has inquired after us, nor has anyone apologized, the letter said. It's as if this massacre that shocked the whole world never even happened. Yeah, that's what the Beijing regime wants you to believe. They want you to forget it. That's why it's important on this day that we remember it. While the group is routinely ignored when it calls for a reappraisal of the massacre, its members are also routinely subjected to to monitoring, surveillance, and enforced out-of-town vacations. Enforced out-of-town vacations. Enforced out-of-town vacations. Yeah. With state security police on dates considered politically sensitive. Quote, it seems that this hugely powerful dictatorship of the proletariat is afraid of a vulnerable group of sick and elderly people, unquote, the letter commented wryly. Yes, they are. They are afraid. Because they are afraid of truth. They are afraid of righteousness. Yeah. The letter also makes a personal appeal to Xi, who was voted into a second unlimited term in office by the National People's Congress in March. Quote, in your 6 years in power, you have traveled the length and breadth of our country, witnessing the difficulties of its people and fully expressing your concern for this country, unquote, the mother's letter said. Quote, as a leader of a major country, you cannot not care about the Tiananmen massacre that happened 29 years ago. Surely you must care about the people who were its victims. It added, we demand that the government talk to us as soon as possible. There is not a moment to lose. We are in our twilight years. We still hope to see the day when justice is done for our loved ones. Tiananmen Mother spokeswoman Yu Wei-ji said she hopes the letter will have an effect. Quote, all of the families of the victims hope it will have an effect. Otherwise, we wouldn't have written it, she said. We don't want to wait any longer. It's been 29 years now. The government bears a huge responsibility for this tragedy, and now is the time to resolve it. Suppressing the truth. Subhead. The New York-based Human Rights Watch also called on the Chinese government to acknowledge and take responsibility for the massacre of pro-democracy protesters. Authorities should immediately release activists held for commemorating the occasion and cease censoring discussions of the bloody crackdown, HRW said in a statement on its website. 29 years after the Tiananmen massacre, President Xi Jinping's China dream means getting the world to forget about it, HRW China Director Sophie Richardson said. But suppressing the truth has only fueled demands for justice. Persecuted the relatives of victims. Under President Xi Jinping, the government has further retreated from the democratic ideals the protesters advocated and is aggressively tightening ideological control, attacking civil society groups, and imprisoning rights activists, HRW said. The overseas-based Chinese Human Rights Defenders Network, which compiles rights reports from groups inside China, called on the government to release Liu Xia, widow of the late Nobel Peace Prize winner and political prisoner Liu Xiaobo, as a gesture of reconciliation. Freedom can be a meaningful gesture by the work toward reconciliation for atrocities committed against civilians in the spring of 1989, and also be a way to honor Liu Xiaobo's legacy, the group said in a statement on its website. Liu Xiaobo was a significant voice of moderation and support for the protesters on Tiananmen Square in the spring of 1989, it said. Many activists who have demanded justice for the victims of Tiananmen massacre have themselves been jailed, it said. Today, several 1989 pro-democracy protesters and activists who have long demanded justice for June 4th are in detention centers or prisons in China, suffering from serious medical conditions without getting adequate treatment, CHRD said. These individuals include Chen Wei, Cheng Xi, the list of names there, the list of names that I cannot pronounce. Beijing currently bans public memorials marking the June 4th massacre, bans public memorials marking the June 4th massacre, and has continued to ignore growing calls in China and from overseas for a reappraisal of the 1989 student protests. The number of people killed when People's Liberation Army tanks and troops entered Beijing on the night of June 3 and 4, 1989 remains a mystery. Beijing authorities once put the death toll at nearly 300, but the central government has never issued an official toll or list of names in spite of repeated calls by the Tiananmen mothers. So this was a failed rebellion. It was a failed rebellion. And why did it fail? I think the activists also have to look at that. They had up to 1 million people gathering in Tiananmen Square on a daily basis. And the government sent in, or the Communist Party sent in 100,000 troops and killed, they say 300, it may have been 3,000, we don't know. It could well have been 3,000. Well, it failed because the activists didn't have guns. The military had guns, the government had a monopoly on lethal force, and basically that's why it failed, right? I mean, think about it. If the founders of America hadn't had guns, we would be in America. We would be commemorating the 200 and whatever anniversary of the failed revolution, and we would be demanding that the British government take responsibility and be accountable, and publish the list of names of people who were killed or maimed or anything like that. So, in a failed revolution, that's all you can do. All you can do is commemorate the date when the failure occurred, and continue to demand justice. Oh, we demand justice. We demand justice. But our forefathers had guns, and so the revolution succeeded. And so a new country was born. And that was the difference between June 4th, 1989 in China and July 4th, 1776 in the United States. And that's why we have the Second Amendment. If you're going to revolt, you have to succeed. Otherwise, all you manage to do is create a date when people shed tears and say, "Oh, that was too bad." We want the government to be held accountable. That's all you accomplish, and that's not the goal of a rebellion. The goal of a rebellion is to bring about actual change. But there hasn't been an actual change in China. In fact, it's gotten worse. Xi Jinping has basically become emperor. Now, anybody who challenged one-party dictatorship, they can't even say, down with one-party dictatorship in Hong Kong. And this is what makes the difference. All right. 7 o'clock. We've been going 2 hours now without a break. But I think I can keep going here. So we talked about, basically we talked about North Korea during the first hour, and more or less about China during the second hour. And these are related topics. Of course, one is much larger than the other. Okay, so shall we look at what's actually happening with President Trump? Are they going to get him? No, let's look at the Facebook thing. That's the main headline on Drudge. Facebook data deal reveals deep access, contradicting testimony to Congress, possibly. Okay, that's a. Everyone, that's my King's Report mug. You see that? My King's Report mug. Okay, New York Times. Facebook gave device makers deep access to data on users and friends. The company formed data sharing partnerships with Apple, Samsung, and dozens of other device makers, raising new concerns about its privacy protections. See, in a way, I don't know what all the fuss is about, because I've always assumed that there was no privacy on Facebook. That what I put there about myself is stuff that I don't mind the rest of the world knowing about. Okay, so I don't, As Facebook sought to become the world's dominant social media service, it struck agreements allowing phone and other device makers access to vast amounts of its users' personal information. Facebook has reached data sharing partnerships with at least 60 device makers, including Apple, Amazon, BlackBerry, Microsoft, and Samsung, over the last decade. BlackBerry's still around? Over the last decade, starting before Facebook apps were widely available on smartphones, company officials said. The deals allowed Facebook to expand its reach and let device makers offer customers popular features of the social network, such as messaging, like buttons, and address books. But the partnerships, whose scope has not previously been reported, raised concerns about the company's privacy protections and compliance with a 2011 consent decree with the Federal Trade Commission. Facebook allowed the device companies access to the data of users' friends without their explicit consent, even after declaring that it would no longer share such information with outsiders. Some device makers could retrieve personal information even from users' friends who believed they had barred any sharing, the New York Times found. Some device makers could retrieve personal information even from users' friends who believed they had barred any sharing, the New York Times found. Okay? Most of the partnerships remain in effect, though Facebook began winding them down in April. The company came under intensifying scrutiny by lawmakers and regulators after news reports in March that a political consulting firm, Cambridge Analytica, misused the private information of tens of millions of Facebook users. In the furor that followed, Facebook's leaders said that the kind of access exploited by Cambridge in 2014 was cut off by the next year, when Facebook prohibited developers from collecting information from users' friends. But the company officials did not disclose that Facebook had exempted the makers of cell phones, tablets, and other hardware from such restrictions. You might think that Facebook or device manufacturer is trustworthy, said Sergey Egelman, a privacy researcher at the University of California, Berkeley, who studies the security of mobile apps. But the problem is that as more and more data is collected on the device, and if it can be accessed by apps on the device, it creates serious privacy and security risks. I don't know why he would assume that Facebook or the device manufacturer is trustworthy. Listen, folks. Facebook and device makers, all right, newsflash, their objective is to make money. Their objective is not to be your friend, unless it's going to make them money. So I don't know why people say you might think that Facebook or the device manufacturer is trustworthy. They're not trustworthy, all right? In interviews, Facebook officials defended the data sharing as consistent with its privacy policies, the FTC agreement, and pledges to users. They said its partnerships were governed by contracts that strictly limited the use of the data, including any stored on partners' servers. The officials added that they knew of no cases where the information had been misused. They don't know because they don't want to know. They haven't been looking for it. If you don't look for it, you're not going to find it. Of course not. The company views its device partners as extensions of Facebook, serving its more than 2 billion users, the officials said. These partnerships work very differently from the way in which app developers use our platform, said I'm Archie Bong. I hope that's the way you pronounce it. A Facebook vice president. Unlike developers that provide games and services to Facebook users, the device partners can use Facebook data only to provide versions of the Facebook experience, the official said. Some device partners can retrieve Facebook's users' relationship status, religion, political leaning, and upcoming events, among other data. Tests by the Times showed that the partners requested and received the data in the same way other third parties did. Facebook's view that the device makers are not outsiders lets the partners go even further, the Times found. They can obtain data about a user's Facebook friends, even those who have denied Facebook permission to share information with any third parties. That's a problem. In interviews, several former Facebook software engineers and security experts said they were surprised at the ability to override sharing restrictions. Get that? Override sharing restrictions. And these software engineers and security experts were surprised at the ability to override sharing restrictions. Okay? So don't believe it when they say, oh, this is only going to be your friends or something like that. No, it's like having door locks installed only to find out that the locksmith also gave keys to all of his friends so they can come in and rifle through your stuff without having to ask you for permission, said Ashkan Soltani, a research and privacy consultant who formerly served as the FTC's chief technologist. Let's see here. What is New York Times doing to me here? They have here something called How One Phone Gains Access to Hundreds of Facebook Accounts. Okay, so Michael LaForgia, a New York Times reporter, used the Hub app on a BlackBerry Z10 to log into Facebook. Okay. After connecting to Facebook, the BlackBerry Hub app was able to retrieve detailed data on 556 of Mr. LaForgia's friends, including relationship status, religious and political leanings, and events they plan to attend. Facebook has said that it cut off third parties' access to this type of information in 2015, but that it does not consider BlackBerry a third party in this case. The Hub app was also access to information, including unique identifiers on 294,258 friends of Mr. LaForgia's friends. Wow. Well, that's something. Details of Facebook's partnerships have emerged amid a reckoning in Silicon Valley over the volume of personal information collected on the internet and monetized by the tech industry. The pervasive collection of data, while largely unregulated in the United States, has come under growing criticism from elected officials at home and overseas, and provoked concern among consumers about how freely their information is shared. In a tense appearance before Congress in March, Facebook's chief executive, Mark Zuckerberg, emphasized what he said was a company priority for Facebook users. Quote, every piece of content that you share on Facebook, you own, unquote, he testified. You have complete control over who sees it and how you share it. Well, newsflash, Zuckerberg lied. Liar, liar, pants on fire. But the device partnerships provoked discussion even within Facebook as early as 2012, according to Sandy Parakilis, who at the time led third-party advertising and privacy compliance for Facebook's platform. Quote, this was flagged internally as a privacy issue, unquote, said Mr. Parakilis, who left Facebook that year and has recently emerged as a harsh critic of the company. Quote, it is shocking that this practice may still continue 6 years later, and it appears to contradict Facebook's testimony to Congress that all friend permissions were disabled. The partnerships were briefly mentioned in documents submitted to German lawmakers investigating the social media giant's privacy practices and released by Facebook in mid-May. But Facebook provided the lawmakers with the name of only one partner, BlackBerry, maker of the once ubiquitous mobile device, and little information about how the agreements worked. The submission followed testimony by Joel Kaplan, Facebook's vice president for global public policy, during a closed-door German parliamentary hearing in April. Elizabeth Winkelmeyer-Becker, one of the lawmakers who questioned Mr. Kaplan, said in an interview that she believed the data partnerships disclosed by Facebook have violated users' privacy rights. Quote, what we have been trying to determine is whether Facebook has knowingly handed over user data elsewhere without explicit consent, unquote, Ms. Winkelmeyer-Becker said. Quote, I would never have imagined that this might even be happening secretly via deals with the device makers. BlackBerry users seem to have been turned into data dealers unknowingly and unwillingly. In an interview with the Times, Facebook identified other partners, Apple and Samsung, the world's two biggest smartphone makers, and Amazon, which sells tablets. An Apple spokesman said the company relied on private access to Facebook data for features that enabled users to post photos to the social network without opening the Facebook app, among other things. Apple said its phones no longer had such access to Facebook as of last September. I think my phone is this is an LG. No wonder. Okay, I don't have that ability. Samsung declined to respond to questions about whether it had any data sharing partnerships with Facebook. Amazon also declined to respond to questions. Usher Lieberman, a BlackBerry spokesman, said in a statement that the company used Facebook data only to give its own customers access to their Facebook networks and messages. Mr. Lieberman said that the company did not collect or mine the Facebook data for our customers, adding that BlackBerry has always been in the business of protecting, not monetizing customer data. Right. Microsoft entered a partnership with Facebook in 2008 that allowed Microsoft-powered devices to do things like add contacts and friends and receive notifications, according to a spokesman. He added that the data was stored locally on the phone and was not synced to Microsoft's servers. Facebook acknowledged that some partners did store users' data, including friends' data, on their own servers. A Facebook official said that regardless of where the data was kept, it was governed by strict agreements between the companies. I am dumbfounded, quotation, I am dumbfounded by the attitude that anybody in Facebook's corporate office would think allowing third parties access to data would be a good idea, unquote, said Henning Schulzrine, I guess. Schulzrine. Anyway, Henning, let's just call him by his first name. A computer science professor at Columbia University who specializes in network security and mobile systems. The Cambridge Analytica scandal revealed how loosely Facebook had policed the bustling ecosystem of developers building apps on its platform. They ranged from well-known players like Zynga, the maker of the Farmville game, to smaller ones like a Cambridge contractor who used a quiz taken by about 300,000 Facebook users to gain access to the profiles of as many as 87 million of their friends. So these little things that pop up on your Facebook, so play a little game or something like that, or answer some questions or anything like that. This is someone trying to mine your data. Those developers relied on Facebook's public data channels known as application programming interfaces, or APIs. But starting in 2007, the company also established private data channels for device manufacturers. At the time, mobile phones were less powerful and relatively few of them run standalone Facebook apps like those now common on smartphones. The company continued to build new private APIs for device makers through 2014, spreading user data through tens of millions of mobile devices, game consoles, televisions, and other systems outside Facebook's direct control. Facebook began moving to wind down the partnerships in April after assessing its privacy and data practices in the wake of the Cambridge Analytica scandal. Mr. Archibong said the company had concluded that the partnerships were no longer needed to serve Facebook users. About 22 of them have been shut down. The broad access Facebook provided to device makers raises questions about its compliance with the 2011 consent decree with the FTC. The decree barred Facebook from overriding users' privacy settings without first getting explicit consent. That agreement stemmed from an investigation that found Facebook had allowed app developers and other third parties to collect personal details about users' friends, even when those friends had asked that their information remain private. After the Cambridge Analytica revelations, the FTC began an investigation into whether Facebook's continued sharing of data after 2011 violated the decree. Rich, now with the consumers, quote, they could argue that any sharing of data with third parties is part of the Facebook experience. And this is not at all how the public interpreted their 2014 announcement that they would limit third-party app access to friend data, unquote. Facebook private data channels, the Times used a reporter's Facebook account with about 550 friends, and a 2013 BlackBerry device monitoring what data the device requested and received. More recent BlackBerry devices, which run Google's Android operating system, do not use the same private channels, BlackBerry officials said. Immediately after the reporter connected the device to his Facebook account, it requested some of his profile data, including user ID, name, picture, about information, location, email, and cell phone number. The device then retrieved the reporter's private messages and the responses to them, along with the name and user ID of each person with whom he was communicating. The data flowed to a BlackBerry app known as the Hub, which was designed to let BlackBerry users view all of their messages and social media accounts in one place. The Hub also requested and received data that Facebook's policy appears to prohibit. Since 2015, Facebook has said that apps can request only the names of friends using the same app, but the BlackBerry app had access to all of the reporters' Facebook friends and, for most of them, returned information such as user ID, birthday, work and education history, and whether they were currently online. The BlackBerry device was also able to retrieve identifying information for nearly 295,000 Facebook users. That's one person using one BlackBerry. Most of them were second-degree Facebook friends of the reporter or friends of friends. In all, Facebook empowers BlackBerry devices to access more than 50 types of information about users and their friends, the Times found. Wow. The Times is going after Facebook now. That's interesting. All right. So I guess Facebook, is going to be sort of corralled. Maybe this is why they're switching to Instagram. Facebook owns Instagram, and I understand that more and more young people are switching from Facebook to Instagram. But basically, the same thing is going to happen on Instagram. I mean, it's just pretty much the same thing under a different name. And Facebook will disappear entirely, just like what was it? MySpace? MySpace disappeared. These things come and go, but the same problems remain. And Zuckerberg and his kowtowing to the Chinese. The Guatemala volcano eruption kills 25, injures hundreds. Hawaii evacuees leave home as new lava threatens Big Island. Today for sale on Ancestry.com. Folks, I don't know. What are you thinking? Giving your DNA to a database? I mean, okay, so if you have any Jewish ancestry, or if you have any Viking ancestry, or if you have any Asian ancestry, so you send in your DNA, and it turns out, oh look, you've got 5% African ancestry, or something like that. Private than your DNA information. I think that is the most private thing of all. That's the code that and apparently now Ancestry.com is sort of advertising this thing. Ancestry.com, is in one way it's useful, but just like Facebook and Google and other things, it's useful, but then it has downsides. Some years back when I had more time on my hands, I went into Ancestry.com and I did some research, and I went to the Library of Congress, and so I tracked down my great-grandfather, and found the list of passengers on the ship that he was on when he came to America, and I found where he landed in America and then what kind of course he took from there. And it's all very interesting, and that's all. I think that's very good because it's a way of honoring our ancestors and helping to liberate them. And I think that is important. But then when you take the next step and say, okay, and Ancestry.com says, okay, well, send us your spit, send us a sample of your DNA, and we'll tell you even more about your past. And then I think it starts to get very dangerous. Lehi, Utah, the Mormons place a great deal of emphasis on knowing about your ancestors. This comes from Lehi, Utah. It marks its DNA kits with promises that tug at the heartstrings, discover ancestors, strengthen family ties, understand your life. And because it turns out she was also researching, and so we sort of ran into each other online during this research, and it was kind of fun for a while. I don't know what happened to her. She sort of disappeared one day. Aided by venture capital and a flood of savvy marketing, Ancestry LLC has grown to become the world's largest DNA testing conglomerate. Wow. Since 2012, it has lured more than 5 million people to spit into tubes and add their genetic code to the world's largest private database of DNA. It has also banked away the world's largest collection of human spittle, numbering in the hundreds of gallons. In the age of Facebook and Google, consumers seem comfortable surrendering their personal information to corporations that aggregate it and monetize it. But Ancestry and other DNA testing companies have added an audacious tweak. Customers are now paying to hand over their genetic code, their most sensitive individual identifier, to companies that could monetize it far into the future. Ancestry officials say they have state-of-the-art systems that prevent hacking and security breaches. So far, the company has sidestepped privacy scandals that tripped up companies like Facebook, which allowed a political data firm, Cambridge Analytica, to access data from 50 million customers, or government agencies like the U.S. Office of Personnel Management, which a few years ago exposed more than 1 million personnel records and security clearance data to hackers. But a 3-month review by McClatchy, that's the news service that's writing this article, including visits to Ancestry's headquarters and a main testing lab, reveals a pattern of breached promises to customers, security concerns, and inflated marketing pledges that could give customers some pause. Unidentified hackers last year accessed an Ancestry website, Roots Web, compromising the sign-ins of 55,000 Ancestry customers who had the same login credentials with Roots Web. The site has since been shut down. The incident received little attention, but revealed how customers' personal information could be accessed and exploited through Ancestry's partnership and acquisitions. Ancestry DNA, a subsidiary of Ancestry LLC that markets genetic testing, pledges to safeguard people's private data. And you trust them, right? Oh, they promise to safeguard my personal data. So, of course, they're going to do that. I don't know who they are. I never met them. They could be a convicted criminal. I have no idea. But I trust them because, after all, I met them online. But the company has a history of changing the terms of its agreements with customers. In the most high-profile example, Ancestry in 2014 shut down MyFamily.com, a social networking site where more than 1.5 million users had posted family memories, photos, and conversations. Numerous customers said they had lost treasured family history because of inadequate notification from the company, which decided not to back up the data. Ancestry claims to beat its competitors in accurate analysis of a person's ethnicity, but interviews with company officials reveal that Ancestry has wide gaps in its ethnic markers for Asia and other sections of the world. Outside geneticists and anthropologists say that Ancestry and other companies are making misleading claims about the accuracy of their ethnic analyses. Yeah, so if you get the results back and says, "Oh, look, I'm 50% Croatian," how do you know they're not just making that up? All right. Let's see. Yeah, we'll give him 15% Croatian. Yeah, and you'll be happy about that. So, boy, most ancestry customers, most ancestry customers consent to have their DNA results in a de-identified form shared with the company's research partners in the pursuit of sciences, including finding cures to diseases. But Ancestry's main research partner is a secretive Google subsidiary called Calico Life Sciences. Ancestry's main research partner is a secretive Google subsidiary called Calico Life Sciences, which is focused on ways to extend human longevity through biotechnology. For who? For the elite, who consider themselves to be the ruling class of this world. Critics have labeled Calico a vanity project of several Silicon Valley billionaires who want to extend their own lifespans. These fools who don't know the existence of the spirit world, who don't know that that God's purpose is for human beings to live eternally in the spirit world, want to extend their lifespans here on earth forever if they can. Peter Pitts, a former associate commissioner for the Food and Drug Administration, said it was inevitable that private companies would one day commercialize DNA analysis. But the speed and scope of the industry's rise is worrisome, he said, in part because few consumers read the fine print of a company's terms and conditions. People need to be aware there are risks and benefits, said Pitts, who now runs Center for Medicine in the Public Interest, a New York-based nonprofit. Right now, they see the benefit as being able to have cocktail party conversation about their genetic makeup. They aren't thinking about the risks of giving up their personal information and the long-term implications. Many consumers, he said, have a limited understanding of how DNA is such a unique personal identifier, even more than a fingerprint or social security number. DNA determines the color of a person's hair and eyes, their skin color, and propensity to inherit diseases, information that employers or insurers might want to obtain. And when someone takes a DNA test, the result not only provides information about that individual, but close relatives as well, said Marcy Darnofsky, director of the Center for Genetics and Society, a biotech watchdog group based in Berkeley, California. You are not just taking the test for you, you are taking it for the whole family, she said. Founded by a pair of Brigham Young University graduates in the 1990s, Ancestry.com was one of the earliest internet startups that allowed customers to build their family trees online, accessing troves of information that the company assembled. Paul B. Allen, one of the founders of Ancestry.com, said it makes sense that a family tree internet company would arise in Utah, where the Mormon Church has long kept extensive family history records. This is the mother lode of genealogical research, he said. 30 years later, Ancestry is still based in Utah, but has mushroomed into a multinational company that operates in more than 30 countries, pulling in $1 billion in revenue in 2017. Its headquarters in Lehi, south of Salt Lake City, is home to 1,100 of the company's 1,600 employees. The building features a display of lanterns descending through several floors meant to resemble DNA strands. But to really grasp the company's rapid growth, one needs to visit one of Ancestry's contractor labs, where the company sends customers genetic samples for analysis. One of these labs in La Jolla, California, owned by Illumina, a leading company in sequence and genotyping DNA. On a recent weekday, Illumina lab manager Jay Antico donned gloves and gown and entered the room where kits arrived daily. A line of workers were removing spit from tubes from the kits, scanning their barcodes and checking for defects. Behind them were a wall of shelving filled with thousands of partly filled tubes. How many tubes arrive at Illumina daily? Antico and Ancestry officials declined to say. Let's just say it's a lot, said Antico, eyeing the shelves lined with people's saliva. Like other DNA testing companies, Ancestry uses spit for genetic analysis because it is an easy way for consumers to provide their DNA. Saliva contains white blood cells and cells from the inner lining of people's mouths. Companies such as Illumina isolate the DNA, then go through a multi-step process of amplifying it, processing it, and turning it into a machine-readable code. The entire process takes about 4 days, after which Ancestry uses the code to analyze a customer's ethnicity. Ancestry is highly sensitive about concerns that customers' privacy could be compromised as DNA is shipping around the country, passing through labs and sorting centers. Quote, privacy is basically our top priority here, unquote, Eric Heath, Ancestry's chief privacy officer, said. Quote, in terms of security, we are very cognizant that without our customers' trust, we do not have a business, unquote. To prevent disclosure of customer identities, the kits and spit tubes that Ancestry sends to Illumina are marked only with barcodes, not people's names and addresses. After Illumina finishes its analysis, the results are sent back to Ancestry, which, according to Heath, is the only entity that can reconnect the result with the individual customers. After Ancestry generates an ethnicity estimate for a customer, it is forwarded onto that person's email. Privacy experts say that while this protocol guards against inadvertent disclosure, it still leaves people's genetic data vulnerable. Cyber theft is one risk. The 2017 hacking incident forced Ancestry to shut down its Roots Web website and notify customers whose sign-on information may have been stolen. Ancestry in 2000 had purchased Roots Web, a free genealogical website that offered online forums for people to research their family histories, but apparently had not fully upgraded its security protocols. The Roots Web situation was certainly unfortunate, he said, but he said that Roots Web was a completely separate system from Ancestry's databases that contained sensitive customer information, including DNA data. The company stores that sensitive data in the cloud, he said, with an encrypted system that only can be accessed through Ancestry's own key. Martin Sheldon, a cybersecurity expert based in Silicon Valley, said it's encouraging that Ancestry encrypts its data, but the ultimate security of this system, he added, depends on how they store the encrypted keys. Wide internal access to encryption keys, he said, could contribute to security breaches in the future. Law enforcement also has various ways to access people's DNA data. To make an arrest in the East Area rapist case, Sacramento investigators created a bogus account on an open access DNA database, GED match, and then found a lucky match to DNA taken from a crime scene. Officials for Ancestry, 23andMe, and other leading DNA testing companies say it would be impossible for a law enforcement to use similar surreptitious methods to find suspects on their sites, which only allow customers to send in saliva, not DNA results from an outside testing service. But DNA testing companies could be forced to hand over genetic data in response to court warrant or subpoena, as they generally disclose. Ancestry DNA will never disclose your data to insurance providers, employers, or law enforcement unless compelled by a valid legal process, the company notes on its website. Ancestry also acknowledges that customers could face various risks if their DNA data and other personal information is made public or somehow obtained by third parties. It may be used to identify you. It may negatively impact your ability to obtain certain types of insurance coverage, or used by law enforcement agencies to identify you if they have additional DNA data to compare your data, the company notes in its informed consent clause, which testing companies use to shield themselves from future liability. Unless customers request otherwise, Ancestry adds people's DNA data to its proprietary database, the largest of its kind. In a mere 6 years, the database has grown to include DNA from more than 5 million people, up from 2 million in mid-2016, according to company figures. Ancestry not only stores people's genetic data, but the raw DNA itself, after labs such as Illumina extract a small amount of saliva from the tubes for analysis. The remainder of people's biological sample is returned to Ancestry's custody. Where that DNA is stored and how long it is being stored is unknown, company officials won't say. Ownership of this DNA has been a source of controversy for Ancestry and other companies. Last year, privacy lawyer Joel Winston wrote an article reposted on Think Progress, which criticized Ancestry's terms and conditions, arguing they give the company a free license to exploit people's DNA for the rest of time. Customers must understand that turning over their DNA means a loss of complete ownership and control, Winston wrote. Ancestry.com customers should should also know they're giving up the genetic privacy of themselves and their relatives. The king has emphasized don't take nude photographs of yourselves, or don't record, don't make sex tapes, because when you do, they're going to become public, or they're going to be accessed by various intelligence agencies that are able to access our phones. And this, I think, goes even a step further. I mean, between having a nude photograph of yourself and having your DNA exposed, I think the DNA is more serious. The nude photograph may be embarrassing. Some people do it on purpose, but they're proud of it. But the DNA, as this article points out, not only shows your hair color and stuff like that, but it also shows what diseases that you can be prone to, and other personal information that employers and insurers may be interested in, and someday could even be used in kind of a pre-crime situation, right? Well, this person, they may determine that certain people are predisposed to committing crime or something like that sometime in the future. And this, once you turn it over, as you said, it's theirs, and you cannot get it back. You cannot cancel. You cannot say, "Oh, I'm not going to honor this contract anymore." No, it's theirs. You've given it to them. It's theirs forever until their company goes broke and is bought up by a more nefarious organization, I suppose. Yeah. And then what happens? I think if people are thinking of providing DNA to Ancestry.com or a similar organization, I think they should not. I haven't heard the king speak on this, but I'm pretty sure he would discourage this kind of practice of providing DNA to a database. Why would you do that? Why would you do that? Our ancestors are important, and we want to be able to liberate them. But, we all come from one ancestor, Adam and Eve. So, and that's the most important thing. And right now we're trying to change our lineage so that True Father becomes our original ancestor. True Father becomes our original ancestor. Okay. This article goes on. We've only finished about half of it, it looks like, based on this. I guess now we're almost done. Okay. Let's see. Okay, we're almost done. Let's see. Customers must understand that turning over their DNA means a loss of complete ownership and control. Ancestry reacted strongly to the article, with Heath, the company's chief privacy officer, calling it inflammatory and inaccurate. Soon after, Ancestry updated its terms and conditions, clarifying it does not, quote, claim ownership rights in the DNA that is submitted for testing, unquote. The company, he added, needs to obtain a license from customers to provide the product they purchased. Winston, based in Pittsburgh, said he was surprised at the company's strong pushback, but asserts the upshot is still the same. Quote, Ancestry's terms and conditions are long and somewhat boring, but people should read them, unquote, he said. They make a big deal of stating that you own your DNA, but they are taking a worldwide perpetual royalty-free license to do what they want with your DNA and your actual genetic sample that they keep in storage. So it's in our storage. You own it, but it's ours. It's in our storage. Ancestry allows customers to request their DNA analysis be erased from the company's database after results are received, and also request destruction of their remaining biological sample. But it is a two-step process, and customers must read deep into the company's privacy statement to learn how to do it. Requests for DNA data elimination can be made online, but the company asks consumers to call its support center to request destruction of their biological sample. Quote, they don't make it easy, unquote, said Pitts of Center for Medicine in the Public Interest. One thing they could do right now is have a button right next to the I accept button that says, please destroy my genetic information after obtaining results. That would be a very robust statement and the step in the right direction. Jennifer Lynch, a lawyer with the Electronic Frontier Foundation, another watchdog group, said a major concern with Ancestry and other DNA testing companies is whether their policies will change over time with new ownership and management. Yeah, that's always, companies can get bought up by some company, another company, like, for example, an insurance company may buy Ancestry. How about that? How about an insurance company just buys that database lock, stock, and barrel? Then what are you going to do? Future owners could change privacy protections, she said, including Ancestry's promise not to share personal data with insurance companies. Ancestry officials insist that will never happen. Yeah, because they have a crystal ball, they can see into the future, and they know what it will have. For business and other reasons, but the company's terms and conditions in boilerplate language make clear that but if they don't notice or don't opt out, any changes will become effective 30 days after notification. We have the right to modify these terms or any additional terms that apply to a service at any time, the company says. All right. Yeah, so that's a very dangerous thing. People are so trusting. It's modern, it's modern. So people believe things that they find online when they would not believe the same thing if it were said by someone, spoken by someone verbally in their presence. The fact that it is online makes it, let's see, what other dangers lurk in this world that we live in now? Well, yeah, that's another article about how things are going to get bad. And we've seen a lot of those articles. Which embrace and ponder audiobook rise. And because they don't read, they can't write anymore. Just going through these articles, I find so much poor writing. Everybody else is wrong. 95% of you anyway. How hacker-proof cops used a secret government phone to track and find him. Swimmer faces sharks, massive garbage. Concerns me. Let's look at this. Swimmer faces sharks, massive garbage patch, and regroup caution. Is this the guy that was going to become the first to swim across the Pacific? We had an article about him a few days ago. Certainly he hasn't already done it. Choshi is one of the peninsular points there in Japan. Having once vowed never to attempt such madness again, LeCompte is seeking to take on giant waves, sharks, and a pile of floating garbage the size of Texas in a perilous quest to swim across the Pacific Ocean. Okay, so he hasn't done it yet. Faced with an epic 9,000-kilometer, 5,500-mile adventure, his bid to become the first swimmer to accomplish the daunting feat begins in Japan and is expected to take more than 6 months, finishing in San Francisco. Well, he has the current there that that will take him. It will probably, even if he doesn't want to, it'll take him up near Alaska and down. A part adventure, part scientific research, LeConte and his 8-person support team will conduct a host of marine experiments as they seek to raise awareness of ocean pollution and plastic contamination. 2 days after turning 51, wow, that's pretty good, LeConte will enter the waters off Japan's east coast Tuesday, after which the swimmer will be at the mercy of the elements. The danger of sharks and paralyzing jellyfish. But the Texas-based architect tweaks the nose of fear. The, quote, I like to push my personal limit and try to find what that is. Aboard his yacht. I'm like a tiger in a cage going around and around, he added after 7 years of planning. The mental part is much more important than the physical. You have to make sure you always think about something positive, or you always have something to think about. When you don't have anything to occupy your mind, it goes into kind of a spiral, and that's when trouble starts. LeConte plans to swim for 8 hours a day, burning more than 8,000 calories. The rest of the time he will rest, sleep, and eat on a 20-meter, 67-foot support boat Discoverer that will drop him back into the water at the same spot he exits every day. LeConte, who will wear a wetsuit, snorkel, and fins, is no stranger to adventure. Never again. He says, after swimming across the Atlantic Ocean in 1998, he promised himself never again, but LeConte felt compelled to take the monstrous Pacific Ocean after starting a family. Anything to get out of having to wake up in the middle of the night and go change the baby's diapers, huh? Pollution of the ocean has a big impact, said the father of 2, who will be gathering oceanographic and medical data for 27 scientific organizations, including NASA. When I was little and I was with my father walking on the beach, I didn't see any plastic, or hardly any. Now, every time I go with my kid, we see plastic everywhere, Leonard LeConte, and that's certainly true, who will also wear a device to test levels of radioactive material from the tsunami-hit Fukushima nuclear plant. It made me think what the future for my kid is going to be like. It's a problem we created, and there's a very easy solution to start reversing it. Single-use plastics, for example, if we stop using them, that will make a big change. LeConte leaves from Choshi fishing port in Chiba Prefecture, the same starting point as Frenchman Gerard when he rowed solo across the Pacific in 1991. But LeConte will actually be in the water, potentially shark bait. In the Atlantic, I swam for 5 days with a shark following me, its fin circling, shrugged LeConte, who previously suffered nasty stings when jellyfish got caught in his snorkel. Everybody thinks of Jaws, but I'm more afraid of cold water and being in pain and needing to fight that than sharks. Part of the daunting swim takes him through the Texas-sized Great Pacific garbage patch that floats between Hawaii and California, where tangled plastic poses extra dangers. I don't know how he's going to avoid, because there's a strong current that goes up Japan and around the northern part of the Pacific Ocean. So I don't know how he intends to fight that. Is he going to fight that current? That doesn't seem very wise. Why fight the current? Just let it take you with you. His team will collect water samples to learn more about the buildup of microplastics littering the area. LeConte knows the application of science, and a boat stocked with 2.8 tons of food will only get him so far. What is going to be difficult is every morning going back in the water because you hit a wall, normally after 4 to 6 hours, he said of the mental challenge. I try to disassociate my mind from my body, and everything that happens to my body, pain or cold, I try to put aside. I have a schedule of what I'm going to think about for those 8 hours. It's always about keeping my mind occupied. I will remember a family birthday, for example, and the trick is to engage all your senses. Try to remember the wind on your skin, how the sun felt, that the smells. Then boom, you are back in that moment, reliving it, and your body is just on autopilot. Yeah. Yes. I used to do some long distance swimming long distance. I mean, nothing compared to this, but about, what is it? Some long distance. Actually, when I was in in physical education, was to be able to swim a kilometer, which is what is a kilometer? It's about eighth of a mile. It's a little more than half a mile. Our teachers took us out to the ocean. We live near the ocean, so they took us out there, and we went into the water one at a time, and we swam in a straight line, for this 1 kilometer. And of course, the teachers were there and with rowboats, and anybody who had trouble, they would pick up, in the rowboat and stuff like that. But everybody was expected to be able to complete that. I wonder how many schools do that today. I wonder if that school does that today. Probably not. They'd be probably becoming another beta school like everybody else. Yeah. That was one of the things that we were expected to do. There were several things like that. Where we were, as sixth graders, 11 or 12-year-olds, we were expected to really challenge the limits of our physical bodies and to extend those limits. And I'm very grateful for that experience. That was in Japan, a really rural area of Japan. We also had to walk what I think for 11 or 12-year-old would be a pretty long distance, a few miles. And we did other things, like that. So, challenging the limitations of the human body. And it's a way of, your father said that the way you can get your mind to control the body, to have mind over body, there are two ways, he would say. One is to strengthen the mind through the reading of the word and prayer, and the other is to strike the body, he would say, to beat the body into submission, basically, through fasting, through cold shower conditions, and this kind of thing. So perhaps this gentleman also is thinking something along those lines, although I don't, who knows, maybe. Tourists referred to criminal trial for insulting Egypt on Facebook. Oh my goodness, looks like we only have a couple minutes. Well, let's see if we can't get through this. Oh, I clicked on the wrong article, and I'm coming up with Simon Cowell, not used for mobile phone in 10 months. Okay, well, that's good enough. That's also an interesting article, I suppose. He's not going to get brain cancer, right? It's his subordinates who are answering his phone for him that are going to get the brain cancer. But he says, it has absolutely made me happier. Simon Cowell reveals he hasn't touched his mobile phone in 10 months because it was making him distracted and irritated. I can see that. Music mogul 58 confessed he switched off for the sake of his mental health. Also revealed he is considering letting the BBC buy Britain's Got Talent. Also discussed his aunt Eric Four, who he bans from watching screens too much. Yeah. All right. Sounds like he knows what's going on. All right. Let's start. Sometimes you think you click on one article, it turns out you clicked on another. All right, I think we got it this time. Lebanese tourist referred to criminal trial for insulting Egypt. So was he in Egypt at the time? That's what I'm primarily interested in here. Cairo, yes, I guess he was. A Lebanese tourist, yeah, okay, so he was in Cairo, yeah. He was in Egypt, who posted a video on Facebook complaining of sexual harassment and conditions in Egypt has been So again, well, hey, if you're from Lebanon, you should know that. I mean, not like you're, completely from some other area of the world. All faith and hope, I believe the King will be back, and we'll be broadcasting again from the Chongyung Palace. So please join us there. And some people say they're finding the King's Report and Sunday service hard to find. Please let your friends know. You can repost these. It's allowed for you to repost these on your site and spread this among your friends so that people will know where to find the King's Report. But you have to keep your antenna open and find out where the King is, because we always have to connect with the King, no matter where he is, because he is God's lineage on earth. All right, thank you very much, and God bless, Godspeed, and may His kingdom come. All right, so have a good day. Let me go down here now and end this. I'm my own tech team, so I have to end my own stream here. All right, click. Try again. Click. Okay. Are you sure you want to end your stream? Click. I think that ended it. Try that again. End stream.